So fun fact, you buy a $350,000 house today, 30 years from now, should about quadruple in value.
Right.
There is the fact that your house could be an asset that can appreciate.
Absolutely. You own an asset. Is this thing that I want to do with this money worth? What if it doesn't work?
The house is an asset, but I hope you have that conversation with yourself. Like, what am I borrowing this money for? And
Right.
making sure it's real. Our always enemy is inflation in the mortgage industry, no matter what it really amounts to.
Welcome to Strategic Wealth with Christina. Today I am joined by Josh Chapman and Ryan Chambers, and we are going to be talking through using your house and the equity in your home as an asset towards accomplishing your financial goals. Thanks for being here. So we know that typically buying a house is like the biggest purchase you're going to make. You don't purchase retirement, but I would argue that retirement is pretty expensive as well. But home ownership is a very, very expensive part of your life. The home is also an asset though, right? So
100%. Can
you kind of talk through, we've gone through in a different segment and understand buying the house. But now my question is, when you look at your spreadsheet as an investor or just as a human being, right? You've got your debts and your liabilities. You've got your assets, your financial portfolio, your IRAs, 401ks, all that fun stuff. But there's this other huge asset in the brick and mortar home that you live in, or sticks and mortar, or whatever it is that you live in, right? Sticks and bricks is how I refer to them. But you have this huge tangible piece of property. Talk me through how that could be an asset that someone could use. We have a lot of clients that are like, hey, I got to pay for my kids' college, or hey, I have to, or maybe I'm going to buy a business, or I want to buy rental homes. Whatever it is, life is expensive. So when you're evaluating big purchases or even big investments, I think it's kind of silly not to consider the house as an asset.
100%.
So talk me through what it looks like to leverage that asset to not to say that you'll automatically reach your financial goals, right? Because we can never say that, but to work towards those goals. How can I effectively use my house to help me cross that finish line?
100%. Well, like I said, it's an asset, number one. That's it. It's a physical asset. Unlike your stock account and whatever, your mutual funds, your IRAs, all those things, you're talking about a physical, tangible asset, a real piece of property, which you get the benefit of laying down at night and using and raising a family in and all these other things. But the two or three things that you really start, and this is why we love, as mortgage lenders, working with you, is because we're always thinking about that asset as part of your overall financial plan and overall financial health and your strategies and your goals. So let's just play the game and go down the rabbit hole. So whenever you have an asset such as your house and you've owned it for quite a while and you've paid it down and now you have what we call equity, just the difference between what you may owe on it and what it's worth on paper, and you have a lot of equity in that house, you can now start to leverage that equity or use that equity. Say the interest rates are relatively attractive. So I don't know how they work right now, to be totally honest with you, but I know the federal student housing and the student loans used to be super duper cheap. I think a lot of them are more expensive
They
now.
have gone,
You
yeah.
always just have to look at your cost of borrowing. So if you live in the house and you're going to use it and pull cash out of it, you're going to get a more favorable interest rate than something that is not tethered to somewhere you live. So there is always the interest rate equation you have to run. Like, what's this going to cost me, short and long term? What's this going to cost me? One thing we do creative with you guys all the time is if somebody needs to fund something briefly between turning on a retirement or between, and they're at that magic age, you might as well use the equity, because now you probably even have a tax consequence of pulling money out of an IRA,
Yes.
pulling money out of a qualified account or something like that. But let's also just say, if you're going to then borrow money against your house and use it for a very smart or valid purpose, then you're going to probably get a better interest rate than something else you can go in the market and borrow with. And then number two, it's a non-taxable event. Borrowed money is not income.
Right.
So you are not going to pay taxes on that. You're not going to, be subject to some kind of withholding or something like that. Now, I don't want people just pulling money out of their house unless they have a valid plan.
Sure. Yeah. Don't just do it for
And
fun.
I've done it 150,000 times, literally. Like, if you do have a debt situation and you're paying interest on credit cards and you're paying interest somewhere else, it might not be a bad idea to consolidate that debt and put it in the house. There's two or three other things, though. Like, the tax savings aren't quite what they used to be because they raised the standard deduction. Used to be you'd have mortgage,
Right.
interest deductions, but now the threshold's a lot higher. So that's maybe not as much. But
Agreed.
if you bought rental property, there's all kinds of new tax deductions and new tax strategies. If you pulled out cash out of your house to go buy a business, well, now you're creating, a non-taxable event to go make an income stream.
Right.
Very smart way to use
Sure.
leverage,
Yeah.
right? We don't ever just encourage leverage for leverage's sake, but if you do need to pay off debt, if you do need to buy an asset, if you do need to buy a cash flow stream, your house is probably one of the best ways. And Josh probably knows the statistics. You probably know some of them too. Let's just say, you're maybe not going to keep pace with what you're going to produce,
Sure.
like a stock market, but you're going to get some kind of appreciation rate on average.
Right.
The only time we were wrong about that was when 2008 rolled around and we said everybody's
Surprise!
houses go up.
Sure.
goodness,
yeah.
yeah.
Kansas
Yeah.
City was kind of lucky. We never really actually
I think the
went
Midwest in general was
very
pretty lucky.
negative. We
was.
maybe just
Yeah.
went to zero in the growth
Right.
rate instead of whatever. But I would say on average, we can expect 4 to 5% appreciation.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
fun fact, I looked it up just for giggles. You buy a $350,000 house today, 30 years from now, should about quadruple in value.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there is the fact that your house can be an asset that can appreciate
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, yeah, sure. Maybe you could do better in the market. But here's the thing. And one of the things I always like to remind our clients that we work with is maybe you could do better in the markets, but what's your risk level? What's your comfortability? What's your sleep at night factor? That's my big thing. Like, what's going to make you sleep better at night? And the other thing is the reminder that what makes sense in a spreadsheet is all fine and good, but we don't live in spreadsheet world, right? We live in the real world where we have to have a place to put our head at night. And so here's the thing. Talk me through if I want to, let's just make up a hypothetical scenario. I don't even know. Oh gosh, let's just say there's a $500,000 house and maybe someone has like $250 in equity, right? So they're right at 50%. How much can they borrow for whatever XYZ project, college tuition, whatever it is that they need this money for? They've got $250 in equity, they owe $250. How much of their equity can they access? And then what are they actually doing? Like, are they doing a HELOC? Are they doing a cash out refinance? What are we doing? How do we do that? What lever do we pull?
In this case, the shortest answer to that is generally you can go tap 80% of your home's value at any given moment, whether that's a cash out refinance, which would probably be a 30-year fixed mortgage, a 15-year fixed mortgage. The only difference between a cash out and a purchase is just whether you get money back or not. Now, the interest rate's a little higher on cash out because there's more perceived risk with it. But there's options to pull cash out of your house, whether you just refinance the whole mortgage, whether you go get a HELOC. A HELOC is a second mortgage, stands for home equity line of credit. HELOCs also, too, are variable interest rates. Always, they can't give you a fixed HELOC because it's a line of credit because you're only going to pay interest on what you've borrowed. Now, in converse to that, there's a HE loan or just a second mortgage where you go borrow a fixed amount of money and you have a term like 20 years to pay it back. And that is a fixed payment every month, but it's a one and done on that kind of a deal. HELOCs are lines of credit that are attached to your house where you can borrow, pay down, borrow, pay down, borrow, pay down. The HE loan, the second mortgage is here's $100,000, pay me back over 20 years at 8.5 interest rate or 8%.
So then you're paying
interest
both
rate.
payments. You're paying the original
You'll
mortgage.
still have a first mortgage payment. If you
but
don't
you-
have that paid off, you're going to make
Yeah.
that payment until
Right.
you're done.
Right.
And then the second mortgage payment as well, which could be a HELOC or a second
Mm-hmm.
mortgage. Or, right now we do them a little bit more often because of where interest rates were 5 years ago. But I don't want anybody to refinance a 2.75% fixed mortage on their
Right.
first. We would say, hey, let's
Sure.
get you a second mortgage because
So the first amount is still that lower.
yeah, because if
Got
they're
it.
locked in, like 99% of all the loans I do are fixed rate mortgages.
Right.
We do an occasional ARM here or there, only if it makes sense. But, for the people that we did loans for in 2001 and 2020 and 2022 even, it's like, never touch this again. You're
Right.
basically beating inflation.
Sure.
So that's another thing to think about too. Like buying a home, owning a home, fixing the debt cost is an inflation hedge. So you get that benefit of borrowing the money on your house compared to other assets or other things that are tied to, like, commercial real estate. You're going to have a variable interest rate, or you're invested in all kinds of other things where inflation, bonds, very big victims of inflation.
Sure. Yeah.
So All things being equal, though, your house being the asset, you can borrow 80% as a rule, just a generalized rule. And then there are loans where you can go a little higher, but we don't need to get in the weeds and go down the rabbit holes of all the other loan types. But you can do it through a second mortgage or a new first mortgage is what it really amounts to.
So, okay, $500,000 house. In that example, the person owes $250,000.
They can go borrow $400,000
They can,
all day long.
but they owe $250,000. So can
So
they?
minus the $250,000,
So
they could
$150,000 is
borrow
what they can
$150,000
borrow
out of their
Got
house.
it. Okay. And then, but if they could, let's say they did it as a cash out refi, they're creating a new 30-year timeline.
Correct.
So I guess that would be something I would think about, right? Is,
You gotta run the numbers.
What does your life look like in 30 years? And for me, one of the things I always talk to my clients about is, in general, of course, just like mortgages, there's no one size fits all answer, right? But in general, the idea of retiring with a house payment is intimidating to me. So for a lot of, now again, it depends on your portfolio and what you're going to be able to pull out monthly for cash flow purposes. But for most people, I think the goal is to have this thing paid off by retirement. Sure. So if I'm like 45 and I want to do a cash out refi, is it always 30 years or do you have other time options as well?
You can do as little as an 8-year loan and
Okay.
still do it through a guy like me. And we could do odd lot financing. So you can do from anywhere from 8 to 30. But
Oh,
let's
even
just-
you could pick like 17.
I can go, 8. It has to be a whole year. It can't be 17 and a half years.
Sure.
But yeah, I could
I
do an
didn't know that.
18-year mortgage. I could do a 24-year mortgage.
thought it
I
was
could do
just
whatever
10, 15.
random. No, we can group them in. But let's just flip the coin just for giggles.
Okay.
Let's just say that same exact scenario. Today, my house is worth $500. I owe $250 on the first. I can borrow $150,000, go up to 80%. Let's just say I do that on a new mortgage, knowing that that's a brand new 30-year mortgage.
Right.
What if I use that same $150,000 though to go buy 4 rental properties
Right,
that
now I
now
got the
create a
income.
cash flow that's going to pay my primary
Right.
residence off?
Yep.
I end up with tax deductions on rental properties, whereas I don't have that on my primary the same way.
Right.
And I've now got a plan to pay my house off, plus generate a cash flow stream
Yeah.
in X number of years.
As long as you're a good landlord.
As
and
long
you're
as you're a
someone
good
that has
landlord.
those
Now,
skills.
You have tenant- you have to have
can
tenant.
listen to all kinds of talking heads. Dave Ramsey will say, "Oh, landlords are no," but
Yeah.
it's not a passive income
Sure.
stream. If I
Right.
give you my money and you invest in some bond fund,
Right.
I don't do anything.
Right. You had to do nothing.
Being a landlord, I'm fixing and maintaining and dealing and writing leases.
And you're getting that phone call at
and
2
you're getting
o'clock
a
in the
phone
morning
call
because
unless you
you're
have a
leaking.
management company
Yeah.
between you and them and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But there are ways to buy cash flow streams.
Sure.
And that's not a bad way to use your
Right.
money in any
Absolutely.
way, shape, or form.
Okay.
So
Love it.
anyway, like you said, but 30 years should not be your intimidating factor because interest is interest, no matter where you're
Sure.
going to borrow it from.
Yeah.
That's how we just make sure we always keep it simple, stupid, which is don't forget you're borrowing money. No matter how you borrow money, it's
Yeah.
going to cost you money.
Right.
And everybody thinks, and here's one thing I got to say because it's a pet peeve. There's these things on the internet how you can pay your house off in 6.5 years. It doesn't work
Oh,
like
the
that.
if you pay every 2 weeks
Yeah,
or
it doesn't work like that unless you put all of your money into a line of credit and you pull it out. And it still doesn't even work like that because it's still simple interest at the end of the day on a mortgage, just like it is on any other loan. But we won't go down that either because that is a weird, crazy. I get wackadoodle about that. Long story short is house is an asset, and if I could borrow against my 401k and get my same thing done at a lower rate, I'd say go borrow the money from there.
Yeah.
Just see where your lowest cost is.
So I feel like full disclosure, 401k loans, if your company allows them, also tends to be prime +1 or prime +2. So it may not be a solution. Also, again, just since you brought it up, 401k loans typically have to be paid back in 5 years. Sometimes there's a 15-year exception if it's for like the purchase of a primary home. But in general, that 401k loan might be a little bit more expensive. And if you change jobs and you default on the loan you're defaulting to yourself.
Right.
But if you default on the loan to yourself and you're under 59 and a half, not only do you have to pay the taxes, but you have to pay that 10% penalty. So I totally hear what you're saying. Financial advisor brain comes on and just
No,
says,
I'm
oh,
glad
hang
you
on, wait a
pointed that
minute.
out. That's
There's
a
like
very
so many ins
valid-
and outs.
So you always have to look at each individual situation and say, where can we borrow money the cheapest? I mean, I just
Absolutely.
call Josh and say, Josh,
Right.
I need all your money.
That's what I
and
do
need
too.
it
I
at
say,
0%
Josh.
interest rates, but
We all need a Josh in our lives or a benefactor. Say, hey, look, I need this money. Give it to me now. I guess, okay, so that's all fine and good. Josh, anything from like the agent perspective, dealing with buyers or sellers or I mean, because I know as people are looking at houses, right, you hear these conversations as well. Or if people are looking at like buying rentals, what are the things that, again, I know that like Ryan is the finance business side of it, but you hear these conversations and
Sure.
you are adjacent, right? So any thoughts or tips or anything that you kind of hear in your perspective with these individuals?
I recommend before you come and talk to me, know exactly what you're getting into with a HELOC, or if you want whatever capital you're going to get, whether it's a gift or you're tying it into a loan, just make sure you know exactly what you're getting into, because you don't want any surprises, right? And when you get to actually go into contract on a house, the financing piece can kill deals. It happens all the time. So really just make sure you know exactly what you're doing. And a lot of times I can walk you through a lot of things, but I can't make financial decisions for people.
Right.
And so they need to talk to Ryan.
Yeah.
And figure out exactly what they can afford, all that stuff, because that helps tremendously. Because I want to help make people happy and help them buy houses.
Yeah.
But they need to know what they're getting into before that. So that's really where it comes from. From a seller standpoint, if you want to take money out to fix things, do that. But otherwise, like really from the buyer side, it's more of what you can afford and what you can do.
I think one of the things that I would just kind of throw out there, and I don't have a one size fits all answer. And here's the other thing, to your point about things you see on the internet, I think it's so important to note, and it drives me crazy as a financial advisor, because people will say, well, I saw this, or I heard Dave Ramsey say this, or I heard so-and-so. I mean, I pick on Dave Ramsey because he's the name that people hear the most.
Yeah.
But in general, there's always people out there. What drives me insane is they're giving advice without knowing your actual story.
Exactly. That's exactly.
It doesn't always, what is your situation and what makes the most sense for you? But here's the thing that I would just kind of, a perspective that I think people need to consider. To your point, maybe you're cashing out to buy a business or to buy rental homes or to put your kid through college, whatever it is that you're doing. My question would be, for every individual facing this conversation, like, you own an asset. You can absolutely use it and leverage it to your advantage all day long. Absolutely. But the question that you need to ask yourself and you need to think about is that whole sleep at night factor. Is this thing that I want to do with this money worth? What if it doesn't work?
Exactly.
And what if I can't make that payment? Because now that home that I've used as collateral is potentially on the chopping block.
Right.
And again, I think it's very realistic to take cash out of your home and use it to your advantage to pay off debt or to create I don't want to discourage anyone from doing it, but I want to make sure that people go into this decision fully informed and having thought through that entire process, because the last thing you want to do is leverage unsuccessfully the place that your family lives and calls home. So I would just throw out that perspective. I do think that it works out regularly. And I think that that's where good mortgage underwriters come into play, right? Like, you're going to tell someone, hey,
We're going to have a conversation.
can you pay this back?
And
Because
I
if not, don't
really
do
hope
it.
In your exact same scenario, no matter who it is and what they're looking at borrowing money, they're still going to be thinking, can I pay this back? Instead of just saying, I'm going to go borrow the money and default day one. Like,
Right. Some
we're
people
gonna have
do,
a
though.
conversation.
Some people are crazy.
Yeah, some people are crazy. You're right. This is a fact. But it's not like the old days in our world, at least, of, bankruptcies aren't every left and right. But, I could go on a very long soapbox, but the foreclosure rates are the lowest they've ever been. The credit quality is super high in the mortgage industry and in the housing market, for that matter. There's always going to be one-offs. There's always going to be bankruptcies. There's always going to be foreclosures because life happens to a lot of people. But yes, if you call me and say, I want to take cash out of my house to go to Vegas because I really believe in Red 27 or
red.
whatever it is, I'm going to be like, hey, let's talk about this.
Right.
Let's really, really talk about this.
Sure.
And we're going to say, what's the cash for? And in fact, we have to write letters for underwriters saying, what's the point of the cash out?
Oh, I
what are
didn't
we
know
doing
that.
with this cash?
Interesting.
They want to see that it's for a home improvement, debt consolidation,
I
something
didn't know
real,
that.
something
Okay.
whatever. That's their opinion. That's their right to ask.
Sure,
Now, you could
it's
also
their
just
money.
say, hey, I hate them or whatever. But
Right.
we always want to make underwriters the enemies, but it's still like, we can also say, no, it's none of your business what I'm using this cash for. I've done this
Interesting.
before, right?
Yeah.
Fun facts, not fun facts. I've let people borrow money out of their house so they can bail their kids out of jail.
Wow.
Like, it's happened. It's
Yeah.
what's your paying threshold? And then those people aren't sitting there having a very logical conversation of like, can we pay this back? Can we make this work? They're like, I got to get my kid
'cause
out
it's
of
an
jail.
emergency,
Right, it's
they
an
feel like.
emergency
Yeah.
for them at that
Sure.
point in time.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
all things being equal, the house is an asset, but I hope you have that conversation with yourself. Like, what am I borrowing this money for? And
Right.
making sure it's real.
Yeah.
No, you're going to have to pay it back. That's
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, is whatever. So some other fun facts, I guess, is I think the total U.S. mortgage market is somewhere around like $13.5 trillion. So it's big. We're not talking, we're playing with like little stuff here. Like
Right.
the amount of mortgage debt in the United States is commensurate to the stock market
Mm-hmm,
values. It's commensurate to like other huge markets.
Right.
So there's obviously a lot of standardized practices and things that we can see and tons of data we can extrapolate. And, you know, obviously when the economy's good, most mortgages perform very well. But now since we came off of COVID, interest rates are very low. Those loans are always going to perform very well. People
Right.
don't want to mess up their 2.5 or
Right.
3.2% interest rate. So, you know, I'm standing here today saying, whatever
You're sitting,
financial,
just
I'm
for-
sitting
just
here
for-
today.
keep you honest here.
Next to Josh and Christina, that whatever happens isn't going to be like housing driven like maybe 2008 was,
Right.
or whatever things we can't. And that's the whole point of a crisis. It's unexpected, right?
Right.
So we don't know what it's going to be. None of us sitting here do. But I can tell you the mortgage market is very tumultuous, ups and downs, highs and lows, and very news and data driven. I'll say the last 2 or 3 things, just for the fun facts for everybody, is mortgages are bonds. At the end of the day, all mortgages get turned into bonds. So bonds have a natural enemy called inflation. All mortgages have a natural enemy called inflation. When we have spikes in oil prices, that affects mortgage rates because oil prices control everything. Oil prices make inflation happen. So our always enemy is inflation in the mortgage industry, no matter what it really amounts to. So we kind of like also safe havens when everybody buys U.S. Treasuries. Now, they aren't one-to-one pegged, but mortgage rates trade close to the 10-year Treasury. So you can always kind of add about 2% to a U.S. Treasury 10-year rate, and that's going to give a baseline of where the mortgage rates are for the most part. So whenever there's a safe haven, people are buying bonds, aka Treasuries, mortgage rates tend to get better. Whenever there's a lot of inflation, bonds are getting hammered, mortgage rates tend to get worse. Right now we're in that. Mortgage rates tend to get worse. But I still would encourage people to go buy a house because you're going to miss out, and you can't time the market.
Right.
I can't time the
Right.
market. And like
can't
Josh
either,
said,
just
the
for the record.
bus is going to circle. You got to figure out whether you're going to get on it or
Right.
not.
Right.
And even if you're paying a 1% higher rate than if you waited it out perfectly and timed the market, think about the appreciation you're going to miss
Right.
out
The
on.
house
Correct.
is probably going to cost more a year
There's
later
no
anyway.
reason to sit there and
Right.
try to time the market because you're not going to do it perfectly.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's my
And
2 cents for that.
My advice is to stop reading headlines and looking into that because it's so negatively driven because that gets eyeballs. You got to remember all these media companies are all about making money and negativity
They need
brings
the
in
ratings.
readers, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm just it's if you want to get on the bus, just do it. I mean, that's the biggest thing, and it's usually not as negative as the media makes it out to be.
Right.
Yes, it's expensive to buy a home,
Sure. Right.
but it's
right.
it's
But
worth
it is what it is.
Exactly.
You're like, that's the thing.
It is what it
It's-
is. Are you, and with renting, are you paying someone else's mortgage or do you want to start building an asset for yourself long term?
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's really the way it goes.
Love it. Well, thank you both for talking through all that. If you are in a situation where you're looking through evaluating your portfolio and including your home and the equity in that as an asset, and you just need help kind of figuring out the next best step, that's kind of my thing in life is like, just do the next best thing, right? Just make the next right step. So if you're in that position and you're trying to figure out what it is, let us know. We'd be more than happy to help.
Absolutely.
Thank you both for your time.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome.